I'm Dennis Arbour. I'm a near-death experience person. Death and return experience person. I do the bullwhip because it's very good for the body, a tremendous aerobic exercise workout. And at one point, I lost my ability to even walk for the rest of my life. That's a miracle. That's a miracle because I should have never walked again in my life. This was given to me. I was paralyzed from the waist down forever. Well, really what happened and what I tried to say in the book Being the Phoenix, the last vision given was the first vision I present. And it's very important because that last vision, just before I woke up, is what this dialogue is going to lead to as my lecture point. It seems that all of a sudden I was under very, very black skies, and there was a group of people around me, 2 or 3 dozen. We were all kind of mulling around, and then all of a sudden a voice at the very back behind my head said directly to me, "You are at the River Styx." I was at the River Styx with 2 or 3 dozen people, and there was the shoreline, and the skies overhead were completely black. There was a fog across the river, and in this crowd, one man turned, looked at me, and then said to the whole entire crowd, "Who will give this man a coin that he may cross over?" I guess I was without coins, and no, I had no coins. And you can't cross the river on the boat unless you have a coin. But I also have to tell you something here also that is noticed on the other side, the far land, across the river. People don't move their lips when they speak, and yet you can hear them speak to you. Also, you can hear, or rather still you know, what they're thinking. And on top of that, you know what they're feeling in their heart. I guess it rubs off as you're there, but it's noticeable right away. So between all those three, you can't lie. There is no lying on the other side. You cannot lie. People can hear your heart, your mind, and your words, and see if they match. When this man asked the crowd, "Who will give this man a coin that he may cross over?" no one would respond, and their thoughts in their heart were of fear, because they were afraid of losing their place on the other side and going against the will of God. They did not want that to change, because if God meant me to be there without a coin, they shouldn't tamper with it. So all refused and turned aside. In my distress, I didn't know what to do, and wondered what I was going to do with myself. I didn't know what to do. I'd never been to a place such as this before. Then suddenly, about arm's length or a little bit more away, a brilliant light went on, and everybody groaned and turned aside, because they could not look at the light. And I did too. But I was in so much trouble, I decided to look. I couldn't be in any more trouble than that, now could I? So I turned, and I held my hand up and looked between my fingers at the brilliant light. And in that, I saw there was a woman standing there, looking directly up. She was dressed in a gown made of light, and an even brighter light shone down upon her. Then I heard that voice again, and I know whose voice that is. I think we all do. It's the one God that we all know. And he said to me, even closer to the back of my head, "This is your guardian, full of light. come to take you back to the land of the living." With that, she turned and she looked at me, and then turned away and started to walk up the banks of the river. She stopped at the top and turned around and looked at me with a look on her face as if to say, "Well, are you coming?" Of which I did. I went up the banks and I followed her across the landscape for a very long time. And there was an air around her. She lit up the whole entire landscape underneath the pitch black skies. And then in the air, there was thoughts and ideas, things I knew. "Oh, I know this. Yes, I've heard of that. Oh, that's new to me." And I was taking this all in, knowing full well I was going to bring it back to the land of the living. And in the process, I got worried, and I began to think, I'll never be able to remember all of this. And she stopped dead in her tracks and turned around, the guardian, and she looked in my eyes and said, "Do not fear." And then she walked on. We did this, and the sky started to turn purple, then a dark blue, then a dark blue with a golden touch in the clouds, and then a blue with the clouds gold, and then a pale blue like the sky is every day, and white clouds, and I knew the sun was going to rise. And as I had walked behind her, every now and then I would stop and think, I'm not going to be remembering all of this around her that's all about her and that I'm getting as tools, knowledge, teachings. And she would stop, and she'd turn around and she'd look at me and say, "Do not fear," and then turn around and walk on. This happened about 5 or 6 times in a very long walk, and then finally, the last time, the sun was about to rise. And in the process, I worried again, and she said to me as she turned, "Do not fear," and turned and walked on. And I walked behind her, and then I turned to see, because I knew the sun was going to come up over the horizon. And then suddenly the first rays of the sun struck me in the eyes. At that moment, I was suddenly sitting in a hospital bed with oxygen tubes on my nose, a tray in my lap, in a room I could not even remember, and I didn't even know where I was now, because I'd been taken so many other places already. To shorten things up, I'll say that I reached for the oxygen tubes and my arm was like a broomstick with string hung on it. I went from 160 pounds down to 107 pounds, and I was weak. I was there for about a week and a half and then got transferred back to the original rehabilitation unit where the Phoenix was laid in the floor. And when I was there, I was told by the psychologist that I had gone through enough to kill 6 or 7 people. And then I died, afterwards, from something else. That's remarkable. But then, I came back. And now here I was at the rehabilitation unit again. And I would go down in the wheelchair, because I was still paralyzed from the waist down in the first 2 or 3 days. And I would go to the Phoenix on the floor. And I understood what that meant at this point. I couldn't shake the feeling also, still, that there was someone around me. I thought, well, it's got to be an after effect of such an incredible situation that I'd been through. There I was back in life again. Here I am. It was hard to digest, but they decided to see what I could do, and I started telling them at the rehabilitation unit, my legs are tingling. I can move them. And to shorten the story up, in a short 20 to 21 days, back at the rehabilitation unit, I stood, I took my first steps, and from the beginning till the 28th of February, learned to walk again. And this was impossible because the injury that I had from cancer that moved to my spine was on a permanent basis and has never, ever been known to be reversed. I came home, and I've gotten better and better since then. Yeah, it's hard pulling a body out of complete atrophy. You can't imagine what it's like. I can also say I couldn't shake that feeling. Someone was there. Someone was there. And I also remember that on the day that I left and walked the few steps to the car and got in, we were about 10 minutes on the way home, and I heard a voice talk to me. Well, after going through all the ordeals that I went through, I would chalk it up and laugh it off as anybody might. But that voice, for some reason or other, stuck to me. And it was simple what they said. You are returning to the devil's country. Well, where isn't? Needless to say, when I came back, weeks went by, I gained strength, months went by, and odd and peculiar things started happening around the house, around me, and I could not shake the sense of that presence of someone there. Sometimes things would absolutely disappear off a counter, and then you couldn't find them. You'd be trying to crawl around on the floor, find it, and then you'd get up and it would be someplace else moved. About 3 or 4 times of this, I finally got it into my head I was going to say to whoever or whatever was doing this, can I have it back? And wherever I had put it, it would not come back there. But it would be not far away, and it would be there. Well, at first, even my sister thought, well, maybe you burned out a few too many brain cells. And I thought, well, okay, we'll have to watch and see what happens. And then we had several very significant things happen that proved that whoever was here was doing it on purpose. One was taking a pamphlet and putting it into a console of a car. And as we were going someplace, we stopped, we're going into a store, put it in the console, and then my partner said to me, well, what about da-da-da? And I opened up the console again to retrieve the pamphlet, and the pamphlet was gone. It was just utterly gone. Gone. Well, okay. That means some crawling around between the seats and underneath the seats and then the back and in the front and looking everywhere thinking, where could this have gone? Meanwhile, my partner had gone in to the store. And I kept looking, and then I couldn't find it, and then finally sat down, and I was wondering what could have happened to that. It was right on top. Well, finally I decided I was going to clean out everything as something was urging me. It's in there. So I took everything in the console out of the console, and there was still nothing there. And then there was this voice telling me, look underneath. Oh, that sounds kind of silly, but okay. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, and if it's silly, no one will know. I'm by myself. And I began to struggle to pull the plastic container out of the console, and finally did get it out. It was that tight in there. But then there was the pamphlet. There is no way it could have by itself gotten beneath and inside the console like that. A few other situations occurred, and they began to be adding up. And one day I was sitting trying to figure out how in the world I'm going to write about what it's like to go through a near-death experience, go and return. And as I was thinking about all of this stuff, I had a hard time rectifying exactly how I felt, because often in near-death experiences there is the good and the bad that you do see. So the end result was that I was perplexed as to how to write this. And as I sat there, I suddenly realized the TV was playing in the other room. And on it, they were talking about the book of Mary Magdalene, where she was the only one spoken to by Christ ever about this. And she asked him, Well, what's the path of heaven like? What can be explained about it by you? And he said to her that the path to heaven had both good and bad on it. And it's not what you do, but it's how you feel. What you feel in your heart. That's what makes all the difference. Knowing full well that something had just happened here that was a coincidence, but I took advantage of it, and I realized that good and bad is exactly what I'd seen, both good and bad, but I was intact between the two. It was very much like walking on the other side. So the next thing I did was ignore the TV, shut it off, and I knew there was someone there. So finally, knowing that I was on some kind of a basis of communication with something, I turned to whoever and whatever it was, and I said, "What is your name?" And of course, you know, if it was your imagination, you'd sit there, well, maybe it's Bob, maybe it's Bill, maybe it's Sarah, maybe it's whatever. But when I said that, the answer came so quickly, it shocked me. I said, "What is your name?" And immediately, right on the tail of it, right on the heels, came a female voice, and it went like this. "What is your name?" "Charity." Well, I heard that, and I thought, that's so trite, that's ridiculous, it's almost pilgrim. What's going on here? It's got to be my imagination. Maybe my sister in email messages and on the phone was right. Maybe I burned out a few too many brain cells. But I jumped onto the internet and I looked up guardian angels, because I had a suspicion that I was not left at the doors of life with a nice adieu by that guardian in the vision, but she had come with me. So I looked them up. Guardian angels, seraphim, living wills of God. Singular form, a seraph. And I read forth, and there were no names. They had no names listed. And I thought, well, that's strange. And I kept reading, and in a particular paragraph was a particular sentence I read through and got to the end of it, and it said, "And they are known for their charity towards mankind." Gotcha. There's another coincidence right in a row. So I shut down the computer and sat there and then asked my next question. And my next question was, well, all right, charity. You're not supposed to have names. And I felt a distinct that it really wasn't. And I said, well, if that's not your real name, why can't I know your real name? And then I could hear it in mind, clear as a bell. If you knew my real name, I would have to do anything you asked of me. And I want some discretionary area to say yes or no in what you request of me. I can't think that fast. So I went with it. I called her Charity. So time went on, and she was there, and I could always feel her. And there were two visions, the one at the end where she walked me out, and earlier at a time where I faced some very negative creatures, entities, beings, personages, and they were pressing on me, and she intervened. She came out of nowhere. She was wearing a charcoal robe with cream color edges around the sleeves and around her neck. She had raven jet black hair and very beautiful soft features, and she told them to leave me alone, that I was not like that. It was not of my heart. And then they tried to press on her again. And then she stepped forward. And something happened. It was like, well, at first I thought like anyone would. This brilliant things came off of her on each shoulder and around her head. White like a light with flaming edges. And around the crown and top of her head. Looked like wings and a halo to me. Don't angels look like that? It took a while longer for me to think about this over and over until I realized I wasn't looking at feathery things that birds wear, but rather still, these were plays of energy coming off of her. And so Because they looked like wings, and because they had fire on the tips, I started calling her a fire wing. Charity has never, when I've asked her, answered me with something that was vague or false or a lie, and has always been on target. And this baffled me because now I was either thinking of myself as a massive psychic or that indeed truly I did have someone there. And more things began to happen. Things would disappear, I'd ask for them back, and they would reappear someplace else, in the same room, only a foot or two away from where I had put something down. Then we had the same thing happen again, with my partner present, in the car with some mail for the neighbors that got into ours in our box, and this is recent. I separated the neighbor's mail out and put it on the dashboard. We drove less than a half a mile home while I avidly read a piece of mail I really didn't want to read. We got there, she got out the door and went around back of the car. I saw the mail on the dashboard, opened the car door, got out, closed the door, and we were walking down to the house. And she said to me, "Aren't you going to bring the mail over to the neighbors?" And I said, as soon as I put my stuff inside, which I did, came back outside, went to the car, and the mail was gone on the dashboard. So, of course, I went back inside, went inside, and he said, "Well, where did you do that mail? I mean, it was there, and now it's not." And I didn't even think that she had walked behind the car or never came out. And she got mad, of course, that I'm being a foolish person. And she said, "I'll show you where it is." And we walked out there together and looked in the car, and it was gone. It was not on the dashboard. It was not in the car, under the seats, crammed into anything. And we were now worried that maybe we would be responsible for the loss of the neighbor's mail, walking in the house saying, what could have happened? Could the wind have blown it out, etc.? But no, it was there when we came home. And then we walked in the house and we were saying, well, maybe this happened, maybe that happened, speculating, when all of a sudden both of us looked at a table that we never use, never go near, and there was the mail, squared and neatly stacked, sitting on the table. These things happen now more often than not, but they don't happen chronically and all the time. But that one is there. She is there. Charity is real. On occasion I have asked her for other people. Should she be a guardian and a seraph, she will help other people. And I asked her for several people who were in very dire straits. One of them with a back injury. She had spinal problems that were going to make her wither and die inside if they didn't operate. And I spoke to this woman on the phone at distance halfway across the country, and I told her I will speak to my charity about this and ask her if she will help. And about a week and 5 days or 6 days later, this person I happened to be connected into while calling a number to get some information, business stuff, and they shunted me right to her phone, and I recognized her voice, and I said, "Oh, can I have this information, that information?" And she gave it to me and emailed it to me as we spoke. And then I said, "And you, how are you? How are you?" And she said, "I'm fine. I got back yesterday. I went through the operations that they were going to give me." And I asked her, did it turn out the way they said? They said it may be a downhill and very bad, unable to walk well afterwards. And she said, "Actually, I woke up and the doctors and the nurses and the surgeons were standing there grinning around us like Cheshire cats. And they said, we're not quite sure what happened, but everything went better than we'd ever expected. And now you're 1,000 times better than you've ever been in your life." In hearing this, I understood that charity would take the requests of me towards other people. And I tried it again and again on other people in various instances where people really truly did need help. And I found in each instance there would be an answer in 24 to 48 hours, and their lives would change very much towards the positive. It was about that time, and we're talking almost a year of a steep learning curve and tolerance later, that I recognized that she was a reality, and this is a very hard thing to talk to anybody about, but it's a reality. Angels are real. and one came back with me. Back last year I had emails with ions.org, and they had answered my question of, do people or citizens or those from the other side come back with you sometimes? And they answered in the affirmative, yes they do. This has happened. This has happened before. People come back with powers to heal. So I was feeling much better about the fact that I was accompanied by someone who was here to help me do what is right and do what is good. And as we all say, all NDE people, we're really not that happy to be back. It was so wonderful where we were. I think that being here is tough for anybody, whether you've been there or not, and back. It's tough stuff being a human being. I think you should all realize that being a human being is a courageous thing, and the best is buried within you. And that is what you need to bring out. I want you to add this all together. I had end-stage cancer. It spread to my spine and left me paralyzed for the rest of my life. It's an injury that no one gets over. I've spoken to many a doctor, and even my oncologist said that is the way it is, and he was rather stunned and shocked himself that this could occur, that I stand and walk. And all of that, getting over the atrophy of a body laying around forever and a day, you might say. Well, 16 days is an awful lot to not move, don't you think? That's a lot to get over. And then on top of it, with a weakened immune system, becoming afflicted with triple pneumonia, and then dying from it, and then come back. And then you tell people amazing stories that yes, there is a heaven. It most certainly is there. And yes, God spoke to me. And yes, I was walked out by an angel. And how can I prove these things? Maybe someday you'll be ill or need my help, and I will ask for that help for you. Bets are on, huh? So you add this all up, and you see a man that should be dead, paralyzed for life, who is walking. You've seen me walk here. And this is the territory of miracles. This is what the heavens are about. And people who come back, near-death experience people in general and specific, do come back with a little part of heaven. It's like bringing heaven down to earth. And I believe it now. And in returning here, I remember how wonderful it was there. And it was very difficult in the beginning for me to get used to, as if I'll ever, or anybody will ever, get used to being back here. We all do feel uncomfortable because what is within us and who we truly are is very, very different than what we have to be in the world. But if we start being more who we are and what we are truly inside, we will aspire to something greater than we could ever be in the world. And I think with that, raise the whole world with us. You can't go out there and change people. You have to change yourself. And I wake up every morning. I'm awfully, shamefully happy. I am so grateful and thankful. I'm a dead man, paralyzed, that is alive and can walk. I think that's a postcard from heaven. And I humbly and proudly take that symbol of the phoenix as mine, because it's enough to show anybody that if it can happen to me, it can and should and is supposed to happen to all of us. What we ought to do then is go from hope to faith to belief to knowing. And when you go from belief to knowing, it happens. We've been stuck too much in the 3D horizontal world to remember where we really came from. We have cosmic amnesia. Yes, we do. We have cosmic amnesia. I was rethinking telling you that, but the truth of it is we can't remember where we really came from. But I think that the most courageous come down here to be human beings. But what you do with it from this point on is up to you. I want to thank you for listening to me, and I hope that great and wonderful things happen to you also, because there is a territory of miracles, and the heavens do exist. Yes, they do. I think I'm going to go outside and do some more practice because it's good for me. It's healthy. It's good cardiovascular stuff, and it really blends the mind with the body so that both can work together. And maybe that's what a lot of us do need. So I'm going to go get healthy. Thank you for listening.